Okay, interesting story. I was 18 years old. I did a lot of smoking and drinking and wallowing in sin back in that day. And I was a paid tenor at Graceland Christian Church. I was still in high school. I was like 16 years old, and a music director at that church. The church was right beside, and I guess still is right beside the Elvis's Graceland mansion. And in that day, there was only this tiny little stone wall between the church and his mansion. I mean, you could jump over the wall, and it's probably this giant fence now, but Elvis would drive through our parking lot because our parking lot connected behind the mansion. And I would show up to sing songs that I didn't even know what they meant, partying all night, and then show up to get $35 to sing a tenor part at Graceland Christian. So I'd actually do have a connection back to Elvis way back. Anyway, all right, so fast forward 10 years or so, to Nashville and being here. But so people like Stephen Curtis Chapman, who is a big, big, big name, he's been inducted to the Grand Ole Opry. He has so many doves and Grammys, and he's like a big deal. He and I started at the same time here in Nashville, and he got a bus, and nobody ever knew who I was, but he traveled and all those number one songs, crazy guy. We used to do a home Bible study together. And
this is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Welcome to the Play Your Position podcast, a show that explores leadership, authenticity, and doing what makes you feel most alive. I'm your host, Mary Lou Kaiser, author of The River Only Runs One Way and The Far Unlit Unknown, 2 books available right now at your favorite online book retailer. Be sure to check them out and make them your companions on the next leg of your leadership journey. Also, you've been hearing me lately talk about my forthcoming book, coming soon. It's not you, it's the algorithm. It's a book with a lyrical call to slow down, look up, and remember who you were before the feed told you who to be. Stay tuned for details as the launch date approaches. And speaking of lyrics, today we're diving into the world of music, leadership, and creative passion with my dear friend, John Chisum. John is a veteran songwriter, publisher, and mentor who has spent over 43 years in the music industry. From working with Christian music legends like Stephen Curtis Chapman and the Gaither family to running Nashville Christian songwriters, John has a wealth of wisdom about finding your authentic voice and navigating the complex landscape of creative entrepreneurship. He's not just about hit songs, but about empowering artists to understand their why and develop their unique talents. Get ready for an inspiring conversation about leadership, creativity, and staying true to yourself in a world that often prioritizes fame over substance. You can find John on LinkedIn and his website. Links to connect with him are in the show notes. When you connect, let him know you heard him here on the Play Your Position podcast. All right, team, are you ready for kickoff? I sure am. Let's go. All right, John. Well, this has been a few months coming. I have been looking forward to our conversation for quite some time. You and I were connected last summer, I think, through our leadership community that we're both a part of. And it has just been such a joy ever since. And I am just thrilled that you're here today to share your stories of leadership and also what you are up to in the music industry. So without further ado, why don't you set the stage for us and tell us your story about when you first got the call to leadership, How old were you? What was going on in your life at the time? And then fast forward to what you're doing today to bring us up to speed and how they are connected, if they're connected at all, because sometimes they're not.
Yeah, thanks, Mary Lou. And hey, everybody listening. It's such a privilege to be here. And you and I have a great love for words and poetry and for communicating wonderful truths into the universe. And so I really appreciate you. I'll do a little shout out for your books. I don't know if you talk about your poetry books, but they're marvelous, very touching, very memorable, and some of my favorite reading right now. So kudos, lots of love. Shout out to Mary Lou.
Woo!
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? I love the whole topic of leadership, and I'm living in the convergence of literally 50 years of training to be where I am now. I can't believe it. I'm older than dirt. I was there when Christ and the Buddha were born. I mean, so freaking old. It is just crazy. But seriously, I felt some call to leadership in my 20s, and I won't go too granular in that, but I didn't really know what that meant. I spent a lot of years in church leadership, and I always thought that I would be a pastor, and I really did. I mean, I am in a way because I coach and counsel a lot of people in my current role, and I have through the years. But I really grew up in a musical family and was just destined to be part of music. And so I've wound up with a 43-year music career now, which is crazy. But the first hint of real leadership came when I got hired to be a publisher here in Nashville. And there's a whole lot of story behind that I won't go into today, maybe some follow-up podcast or something when we want to be really self-indulgent. But I wound up stumbling into Nashville to take a job that fell through in 1983. And I had always dreamed of getting a song published. I was writing and I was a musician and did little, Jesus-y songs back in the day, and didn't know how that would ever happen. And I wound up meeting some people in the music business, and I swear God must have closed their ears, or they had pity on me, or they saw some talent, because they signed me to a publishing contract. Those songs that they heard have never seen the light of day. And that's when I just first started learning how to write songs, when they took me in. And I wrote 5 nights a week during those years. So this was in 1984. And I would write 5 nights a week with people, anybody that would write with me. And I wound up placing about 20 of my own songs with artists. And the publishing people were like, dang, this guy's aggressive. And I would meet with artists, publishers, record company people, producers, managers, anybody that would listen to a song. I would play a song. And so after only a year, probably not even a year and a half of being in Nashville, I got hired to be a publisher. I didn't even know what a publisher was. And I was suddenly tasked with managing other writers.
Wow.
And I was pulling leadership principles out of my toes. I did not know.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to be a leader. I didn't know how to be a publisher. It was complete OJT. But I just knew that I loved music. I wanted to write songs. I had great mentors back in that season, and I learned just by watching. And I really became strong in that. And in the late 80s and early 90s, our company was one of the top companies in placing songs and in managing writers. And I got to really be part of that. So that was my first taste.
Amazing. And for people who may be familiar with the Christian music scene, are there some artists who you got to work with maybe before they became household names? What was exciting outside of just being thrust into this world surreptitiously for you? And I know today, John, you have a multi-million-dollar studio in Nashville, and you're podcasting. You've been podcasting for a while. You still continue to produce music. But going back into that heyday, who are It's okay to name drop. I mean, listeners like to know who are you rubbing elbows with or singing Jesus
Yeah.
songs
Well,
with?
thank you. Yeah. Thanks for the permission because I try not to do that too much. I'll drop the name Elvis. How about
Okay.
that? That's a
Okay.
great name. So, okay. Interesting story. I was 18 years old. I did a lot of smoking and drinking and wallowing in sin back in that day, and I was a paid tenor at Graceland Christian Church. I was still in high school. I was like 16 years old and a music director at that church. The church was right beside, and I guess still is right beside the Elvis's Graceland mansion.
Okay.
And in that day, there was only this tiny little stone wall between the church and his mansion. I mean, you could jump over the wall, and it's probably this giant fence now, but Elvis would drive through our parking lot because our parking lot connected behind the mansion. And
Amazing.
I would show up to sing songs that I didn't even know what they meant, partying all night, and then show up to get $35 to sing a tenor part at Graceland Christian. So I'd actually do have a connection back to Elvis way back. Anyway,
Amazing.
all right. So fast forward to 10 years or so, to Nashville and being here. But so people like Stephen Curtis Chapman, who is a
Mm-hmm.
big name, he's been inducted to the Grand Ole Opry. He has so many doves and Grammys, and he's like a big deal. He and I started at the same time here in Nashville, and he got a bus, and nobody ever knew who I was, but he traveled and all those number one songs. Crazy guy. We used to do a home Bible study together, and he might still remember me, but
I think
he
he
was
probably would.
he was a big name. Amy Grant was new. I didn't really work much with Amy or Michael W. Knew them, a bit here and there.
Sure.
The people I worked with were some of the big names like Sandy Patty, Larnell Harris, Steve Green. I had my first big song was on a Larnell Harris album, and he still sings it to this day, 40 years later. Southern gospel groups like the Cathedrals and those kinds of folks I was hanging out with all the time. But the biggest names were my mentors, Bill and Gloria Gaither. And the Gaithers, they're in their 80s now, and the entire contemporary Christian music field is really built on their shoulders. We're standing on their
Wow.
shoulders. And they were the people that took me in '84 and taught me how to write real songs. So there's a few names there.
Just a few. Just a few. Well, I think that's amazing that you had that connection to Elvis and how much has changed since then. Obviously, he
Crazy.
died. He was smoking and drinking and doing all the stuff. That's
I know, right?
unfortunately what gets so many of these amazing artists, which is that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah,
But
it is.
the fact that you had such great mentors, I'd love for you to talk about what we continue today to talk about mentorship and how important it is. And with the internet being what it is, and with social media being what it is, and how big of an influence those two, well, social media lives on the internet. Talk about the power of in-person, finding real people that you can either be in a group with, or how do you find someone who will take you under their wing and help shape and guide you? What is your wisdom for people listening today for at any age? Because I believe you have to have mentors no matter how old you are.
Oh, absolutely. And I have several in my life. I pay a lot of money for some great coaching and mentors. Today we call mentoring coaching. That's
Yes.
kind of what we call it. And even leadership, even great leaders are great coaches many times. I mean, there's sometimes leaders might not be as open to helping others personally or one-on-one or that kind of thing. But you hit on two things for me. Number one is that the whole idea, I heard two things there. One is the old maxim, become a student and the teacher will appear. I've always loved that. I think
Yes.
that's so important. If you're teachable and hungry, God or the universe or whatever you believe in is always so benevolent and so faithful to send just the right person or people or circumstances that you need. I really believe that. And I've seen that over and over in my life. So that's the first thing, is just to be teachable and hungry enough. The second thing that you touched on is that the value and the power of having a real live mentor, coach, leader, sensei, guru in your life. I don't think you could overemphasize that, because knowledge is everywhere. You have God and the whole universe in your phone, right? You've got
Yep.
everything, and we joke in my house about, if somebody asks a question, we'll say, well, let me go ask God. And what we really mean is the Google, I'm going to go ask Google God, because it's just all there. So just any information you can imagine is at your fingertips. And when people get all fearful about AI, I'm like, I'm not afraid of AI, because it could never replace the heart and the soul of a human being, right?
Right.
So you can find, I'll relate it to my world of songwriting. You can go find a zillion hours of teaching about songwriting on the internet. I have courses. I've got a bunch of podcasts. We have over 200 shows on Song Revolution. And there's lots and lots and lots of knowledge and information. But that's incredibly universes, galaxies away from bringing me or any skilled song coach your work and saying, what do you think? And the greatest fallacy that I have to try to educate out of people is that just because they felt inspired, wrote some words and put a melody to it, that it's a great song that they ought to record and put on the internet. But that's what they do every day. And so our entire company is built on the coaching model. I started in 2015, late 2015, online. I wish I'd bought part of Zoom. I would be very rich.
Yes.
I'd
right.
have a helicopter. I'd have a helicopter pad on the roof if I'd bought part of it, because I was early in the water on Zoom. It was still pretty much an educational platform.
Sure.
And I started Nashville Christian Songwriters online with Zoom. But the whole premise is that you are not very objective about your songs. You're not very objective about your writing. You really can't be, because you love it too much. You care too much. Your heart and soul are tied up in it. And so if you want to compete with the 200,000 songs, no exaggeration, that are released on Spotify alone every day, well, you got to have some quality control here, guys. And so I am able to bring my leadership, my mentoring and coaching skills to empower songwriters to just be better, and to have the fighting chance of their song standing out, from the sea of mediocrity that we're floating in.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's such a great description of what is out there. And I'm not anti-tech. My audience knows that. I also am really questioning right now how far the pendulum has swung in terms of people relying so heavily on an illusion that if you build it, they will come, which who didn't love that in Field of Dreams, right?
Oh, yeah,
It's
totally.
such a classic line. And to some degree, I think, and in certain situations, that may be true. But when it comes to creativity, whether it's songwriting or, in my sense, as a writer, even as podcasters, you and I know there are so many voices always running 24/7 and come new episodes coming every day. And at the end of the day, it does come down to the human connection. You and I just experienced a live event last month where you and I met for the first time in person, and it was such a different experience. Again, not against Zoom, not against even the podcast. I think this medium is phenomenal for so many reasons. And yet, in order to really grow and advance in whatever pursuit a person is interested in, finding that real live person who can be not only objective, but also honest about, listen, You have lived in this industry for more than 40 years, John. You have seen the one-hit wonders. You have seen the wannabe stars that never materialized for a whole host of reasons. The question I have for you now is, for people listening who may be creative, who may have a bent towards writing lyrics or, tweaking on their guitar, their piano, or whatever, what is the climate like right now outside of what you just said? If there's 200,000 songs being uploaded online a day, where does a person who has a dream even begin? Is it do you just jump right into coaching? Do you watch a gazillion videos and then do you continue to hone your craft? Is it all of the above? Like, what is this, like, I guess the strategy, if there is one?
No, that's a wonderful question. And that's a question on the minds of so many people who feel some kind of calling, if you will. That's a big word in the faith, arena, feeling called to be this or that, or to do this or that. And I don't think it's that different in the non-religious world. I mean, people, think of all the wonderful painters and sculptors and artisans, throughout all of history who may or may not have been in a faith-based, scenario, but yet they felt so deeply passionate about doing what they do. And to me, a definition of a calling is something you're going to do no matter what. When you think of the word passion itself, the word passion really means in at least one way to suffer. There is a certain suffering to passion. And we think of it like passionate lovemaking or, passion for this or passion for that. And yet there really is a sense of, I remember, it was true long before Mel Gibson made the movie, but The Passion of the Christ.
Sure.
It's like that's the deepest, most gruesome, horrible suffering, that you could think of in all of history, at least right up there. And so there is a sense in that word of suffering. And I know that I would have written and sung songs if I'd never had one recorded. I don't think I would have ever stopped because I loved it so much. And so for me, the definition of a calling is one that you would do whether you ever got paid for it or not, or whether anyone recognized you or not.
Yes.
And unfortunately, in a media-driven digital age, so many people, young, middle-aged and old, that I work with people ranging from, I've had people as young as 15 up to 80 years old. And a lot of times when I get an application for one of our programs, their motivation, because they have to tell me why they want to do this, is to be famous. And
interesting. They actually say that.
They actually say that. And I know pretty much right then that's probably not someone I'm going to be able to work with because their motivation is just misplaced, right?
Sure.
But that's the model. That's what's put in front of us is overnight success, all the glitz and glamour and sex and sizzle and all that kind of thing. And we're not that. I'm not that. We're definitely more organic and more, oh gosh, what's a good word for it? Just more down to earth, than that.
Yeah.
And so when I think of, I'm trying not to wander too far from your question.
No, this is good.
Your question was about strategy and really the underlying, idea there is success. And so when you boil it all down, for me, success is number one, being true to who you really are and doing your best with what you have. And so the way I approach my life, the way I approach my business, and the way I coach and work with artists is number one, be true to who you are. If you're a gospel artist, don't try to be a contemporary Christian artist. If you're really, I have one folk bluegrass artist, and she really couldn't be anything else because nothing else would be genuine to her. So number one, be true to who you are, who God in the universe has made you to be, your heredity, your color, your gender, everything that you feel is true for you, be that. You be you. Start there. Secondly, stewardship. to really do the best with the hand you've been dealt. I'm never going to be a basketball player, a pro basketball player. I'm short. I'm old. It's like, that's not going to be me, right?
Right.
I don't even like sports all that much, right? So I can't go do that. And so for me to say, oh, I dream of being an NBA player, it's like, well, okay, well, dream on, bro, but you just don't have that skill set, you know?
Right.
When I encounter people quite often who have somehow gotten in their heads that they're going to be a songwriter or an artist, but they just don't have the gear. God didn't make them like that. They didn't inherit any musical sensibility. They don't really understand, how words work. And one of the things that I like to say, Mary Lou, is I can't give you any more talent than God gave you. I can help you develop the talent you have.
Yes.
You have some, right? And you being a poet and an educator and who you are, you know that to be true. You can't really wring blood out of a turnip. You can't, right?
You
I mean,
can't.
and no matter how badly the turnip wants to bleed, you just can't really do it. And so when you talk about strategy, I always go back to that sense of purpose, your why. Simon Sinek in his books, such great books, and he talks about finding your why.
Mm-hmm.
And I lean into that a lot of times. And I was on I don't like to call them sales calls, but I was on a client acquisition call today.
Yes, yes.
And one of the first questions I asked this guy, he was wanting to come here and produce some stuff, and he was like all excited. He'd just a brand new writer, and he's already releasing on Spotify, and he was wanting, us to buy into him. And I'm like, well, dude, tell me what's your why? Why are you even doing this? And he couldn't answer the question, And so that's where I always go. So my first strategy, I'll repeat them in sequence. I think I can do that, is be genuine, be authentic who you are. Number 2, be just a good steward. Number 3, find your why. And that to me sets up everything else. And if you don't have those things, you can throw a lot of good money after bad, chasing social media, setting up websites. If I had every dollar that was spent every day producing bad songs in Nashville, Tennessee, I would be so wealthy. I would own an island in the Caribbean.
Wow.
I would be so wealthy. Because people think that if they just take their songs to a pro studio here in Nashville, that they're going to be a hit. And all they've done is produce really bad songs in a very good way.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
I really appreciate your honesty about that. I think it's good to hear, kind of have that illusion bubble popped for people, because we are living in a time where the forces are so pervasive and in our face. Even if you are actively not going on the channels, people in your life are. And there is this interesting sense around what you just described of, if I just go to this professional studio and I pay my way in, that is going to get me whatever the vision is in their head. And also the whole thing about fame is so fascinating to me. I want to send every one of those people a copy of Matthew Perry's memoir. Listen to this, guys, and tell me if fame is really what you want, because that man had fame and more money, and he completely self-destructed.
Yeah.
And he even says in that memoir, he says, if I could trade all the money and all the fame and everything I have had in my life with a friend of his who was living in a rent-controlled apartment who worried about how to pay his bills every month, who had never been famous. He said, I would have done it in a heartbeat if I didn't have to be an addict, because that was his cross to bear
Yeah.
his whole life, was
Yeah.
addiction. And
Right.
some people can beat it and come out the other side. He could not. And fame, as you have seen yourself, John, can be a vicious, vicious mistress,
Yeah, there you go.
you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'll never be as famous as Matthew Perry or Elvis, but and I wouldn't even pretend to even be remotely close to that. But there's a certain burden that comes with that, and when I hear someone say that that's their motivation, like I said earlier, I know that's probably not going to be a good fit for me because I could never promise that to anybody, and
Right.
I could never go into a relationship with that as the onus on my back, that I'm
Yeah.
letting you pay me because you're expecting me to make you famous. It's like, phew, screw that. I wouldn't even take that on, at
Mm-mm.
all. But yeah, so it's a weird kind of thing. Even in the faith-based Christian world, there's still a whole lot of that because people are people, you know.
Yes. Yes.
I want to back up to something, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
When we were talking, occurred to me a while ago that I truly believe in when we were talking about the coaching thing, and I think it really applies here too. There is like in Buddhism, there's like the guru's transmission, the transmission of the guru. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's like the belief that even if you're in the presence of a very holy person, that there is, without even any words, there is a spiritual transmission. And that is very true in a biblical sense as well. Even in the Old Testament, when King Saul would hang out with prophets, he would start to prophesy. And then you think of Jesus and the disciples and the
Mm-hmm.
different spiritual blessings and anointings that were passed from Christ to his disciples. He walked in miracles and then they would walk in miracles, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's a biblical principle, but it's also in Buddhism and probably other arenas. But when you think of mentoring and coaching, there is a certain transmission, whether it's psychological or whether there is a spiritual slash soulish component to it. There is something that happens. And you think of monastic communities around the world who come together for certain things, and that's their vibe, and that's the spirit, if you will, that kind of comes off of them. And and to put it in more of a leadership kind of a way, I've heard so many times that we are the amalgam or the sum of the six people closest to us, right? And so we
Mm-hmm.
need to be careful because, bad company corrupts good morals, and we
Mm-hmm.
really are deeply influenced by the people we hang out with. And so in my world, one of the things that I've seen through my whole career is that because there's been such a strong, I'm going to go ahead and say calling again, because it was the first thing I felt when I had a strong conversion experience at 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I wanted to do, I grew up in a musical family. I wanted to write a song about Jesus and sing it to the world. Never dreamed that I would be looking back these 43 years later with over 400 songs recorded in my own company and all that. But what I've seen happen over and over and over with the writers I've managed, and then with writers, even writers that I speak to on a sales call, client acquisition call, that I've had people, and it totally pisses me off, but I'll like pour my heart out in the call, right? And they won't buy my program, but they'll call me 6 months later and say, I've been writing like crazy since I talked to you because you encouraged me so much. And I'm like, well, dang it, you should have given me money or something. But it's like, I really believe that there is a transmission,
Yes.
at least intellectually. I don't know. I mean, maybe you can shed some light on it because you know what you're a leader. You know what being a leader is.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something that is transferred there's a transmission from us to people that would be our students or our clients or our pupils or devotees, whatever they are.
Yes.
There's something that's passed down, that these values, this spirit, if you will, this vibe. I mean, we can even go to an energetic level.
Oh,
You know,
100%. It's a frequency, and that's in the music world. I mean, you frequency is it's all about that, right?
Yeah.
And it's 100%. There's no question in my mind that what you're saying, it's 100. It's absolutely
It's the universe.
accurate.
I mean, we live in the frequency of the universe, the Schumann frequency,
Yep.
the frequency of the whole world itself. You go,
Yeah.
girl. Talk about frequencies for a minute. But
Just energy. So one thing I've come to understand is energy is flowing all around us all the time, and we are always operating on a specific frequency. And there's a lot of variables that can play into what frequency we're on. And some of the thought leaders that I've been studying for the last 10, 15 years I've learned, and they've drilled into my head over and over again, that it is possible to elevate to get up onto a higher frequency, but it's going to take some of that suffering that you were talking about earlier, which I'm really glad you brought up, because the law of polarity says for everything that's good, there is something bad. For everything that's bad, there is something good. And we want to, I think, again, culturally, want to only focus on the good and the positive in the general sense, despite the fact that most of what's thrown at us is negative, which is a weird dichotomy, but I digress. Working with a group, whether you're in a group coaching session or a classroom, or you're one-on-one with a coach, a mentor, or a leader, it is fundamentally human. And as more technology, you brought up AI. I'm a huge AI proponent. I think it's one of the greatest things ever. I have learned how to use it in a way that it's so much more than just a tool. It is a strategic thinking partner. It is somebody that I can turn to and gain insight from as I'm wrestling with stuff. And because I'm a solopreneur, I don't have a team. I can't go into the boardroom, right, and have that energy exchange. But I can do that with AI. Now, it does not replace the human. At the end of the day, the human must come back into the equation at whatever level you're using it at. And your experience with people who are excited and new, and they have this dream, and they believe that they're going to be the next whoever, right? And you have seen this pattern over and over and over again, and know that at the end of the day, the ones who are probably going to achieve whatever their version of that is are the ones who are going to pay attention to the people that they spend their time with. I think it was Jim Rohn who said, we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And I used to make a joke during the pandemic. I'm like, okay, so it's me and my cat. What does that mean? What does that say about me?
The cat had 9 lives, so you were hanging out with 9
I was
people.
hanging out with a lot of wisdom from those 9 lives.
Yeah, you were.
But yeah, it is an energy. It's an energy exchange, and the thing that I love about working with people, what I loved about it being an educator when I was in the classroom, was every single day there was going to be that, and you didn't know and it would change from class to class. I'd start in the morning at 7:30. And I'd end my day, my last class would start around 1:30 or so. And just the dynamic and the energy levels and the kind of people that were in the room, that was such a variety that I really learned, boots on the ground, how powerful that dynamic is. And, for someone like you, John, who is guiding an evolving and emerging songwriter in the Christian genre, right? That we use that. You're going to know nuances and dynamics and be able to pick up on things in that one-on-one that they're not going to get holed up in their room, furiously writing in a notebook, even though you encourage them. And I'm not dismissing that encouragement. one of the reasons I do this podcast is I want my audience, Team PYP, to feel empowered, inspired, encouraged. Whatever a guest or I say during a conversation like this, I don't know what's going to strike a nerve and be the breakthrough or the, oh my gosh, that's what I needed to hear today. But that's the beauty of the human exchange, not the, oh, I'm going to go, sink myself into the doom scroll. Right?
Oh my gosh. Right? Oh gosh.
And I wanted to ask you a follow-up question. What is your inclination about when people say, I want to be famous? Do they mean that they want to be rich? Do they really mean that they want everybody in the world to know who they are? Like, what is your impression of when people say, I want to be famous? What is the general term of that?
Well,
is it the money?
No, you know what? Maybe secretly it is. There's a funny thing. There's a false humility that Christians have to have, or they take your Christian card away or something. I don't know what it is. But, I mean, I've had hundreds of people say, the three things they say are, I started writing poetry when I was a kid. They say that, because a lot of us did. And then they'll say, I just want to use my gifts for God. They'll say that. And then which is great. That's stewardship. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll say, I just want to get my songs out there, but I don't want to be famous. And it's not about the money. I've had so many people say that. And a few people I've dared to call on it, but then I kind of found out that really wasn't worth the agony I was going to have to put up with if I did. It was going to prolong probably a bad sales call. So, I didn't get on a high horse about it, but it's just a weird thing that it's a false humility. And I would say, I would name a very famous Christian songwriter who's made millions. And I would say, well, do you know such and such song by so-and-so? And they would say, well, yeah, I love that song. And I'd say, well, do you think so-and-so deserves to be paid, what he or she is worth for that song? Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. And I said, well, then why don't you? And if you make more money, then if you're a nice person, you can do more good in the world. Prosperity is a good thing. There's no value or glory in poverty and suffering. And whether you think I'm buying into a prosperity gospel, it's like, well, I don't care whether you think that or not. I want to make more money. I want to have more money in my bank account because I want to do good things. And,
right.
And that's a whole other can of worms. But there is this false humility where people that might out of one side of their mouths say they want to be famous and they want to get their songs out there. And then out of the other side of their mouth say, well, the money and the fame isn't important. But it really is, and they go together. If you're going to be any kind of success at anything in the world, when it comes to commercial endeavors anyway, then financial rewards generally come with it, unless you're so crazily, that's just crazy, and you sign all your royalties away or something. I don't know.
Right.
Altruistic, that was the word. Unless you're just so altruistic that, and I know that some people, think of Rick Warren, who wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, and it was that book is like second only to the Bible, and millions and millions and millions of copies. He paid his church back all the money they'd ever paid him as a salary, and then donated like a whole truckload of what comes in, to charities and whatever. Very altruistic and done very well. But even the small percentage that he keeps is still millions of dollars,
Right.
It's still plenty of money, So it's a crazy thing. But I find that people are false. They buy into a false humility in the Christian world anyway. I don't know about other worlds, but definitely in mine they do.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I'm the granddaughter of a Methodist minister, and my mother is very, she's devout and very much a Christian. And my dad was a scientist. So I had these two forces. I'm like the product of the
there
the
is
spiritual.
No God. There is a God. There is no God.
My
There is a
father
God.
was
There is
so,
no.
Oh, my father was so famous, like, because, my mother's a huge sports fan, just like I am. And you know how you see players. I know you said earlier you're not a big sports fan, but I'm sure you're aware many players, after they make a big play, they'll tap there and they'll point up at
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
right. And my
Yeah.
dad's like, there's nobody up there. He'd sit there in his chair.
He's wasting his time.
There's nobody up
Wasting his
there.
time.
Meanwhile, I listen to again some thought leaders who definitely look at the laws of the universe, which are very much based in physics and science and all this stuff, which is my dad's lane. And then there's a lot of mystery. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of, and that's the magic of life is we don't know. And I feel like in a culture like America, where there is it seems like it's amplified because of the internet and social media. There is such an in your face about wealth and riches and just burning money. And in the music industry, not necessarily in yours, but in other genres, it is lavishly shown through a variety of ways. And when you're young and you don't have any power and you don't have any money, it's very appealing because you see that as that's going to be my way of making it. And if fame is part of that, then so be it. So it's an interesting philosophical, I think, conundrum that anybody who, going back to what you were saying about Simon Sinek and his, the finding your why, I feel like when people say what they say to you in the early stages, that they're not clear about, you have to get clear about the money piece if you're going to be successful in any way, because otherwise you're either going to get taken advantage of by people who do know and see you as easy pickings, or you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble because you don't understand that it may not always be coming in at this level. There's going to be some ups and downs. I was talking to somebody the other day about that, where there's that roller coaster when you're an entrepreneur and you have these flush months where maybe you do acquire several clients and your bank account is fat. And then there's some lean months where you're like, well, where's my people? And
Yeah.
it's learning how to balance that and being very clear. Again, why are you doing what you're doing? Would you do it for free? I love that you said that. People ask me all the time, gosh, Mary Lou, you've been podcasting for 11 years, and they automatically assume I'm making boatloads of money from it. I'm like, no, I do it because I love it. I love people. I love these kinds of conversations. I am serving in my very small way the world with my loyal audience who tunes in and wants to hear stories about the trials and tribulations of being a leader or whatever we talk about, right?
Yeah.
And life has a funny way of evening out, wouldn't you say? It really does.
Totally.
It really does.
Absolutely.
So I look at the clock and I think, how can we be coming up on an hour? But I want to give you a chance, John, to share where you hang out online, where people can find your programs, check out some of your music, listen to some of your podcasts, just get to know you better. So where are some good places that they can go?
Thank you, Mary Lou. My big podcast is called Song Revolution with John Chisum. Over 200 episodes. I do a lot of teaching and encouraging on it. I do have some pretty awesome people. Probably the most famous interview I've had is with Bear Reinhardt of Need to Breathe, and a big band, big pop band. And I've got a lot of the Christian artists and worship leaders, people like Carrie Job and Cody Carnes, Matt Maher, an artist named David Leonard, and some great people that are pretty well known in the Christian space. And they're just lovely people. I've had a great time doing it. We've just launched season 3, and we're back to weekly, releasing shows every Monday, which is kind of fun. And you can find everything about me at NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com. I do have another little 22 episode podcast called All the Best with John Chisum. Probably about 3 years ago, maybe 4, I actually thought that I was going to let a little bit of the songwriting thing go for a while and just move into coaching. because I love it so much. And so I interviewed people that are atheists, people that are agnostic, Buddhist, people that were so outside of the Christian thing, because I was like, there's a whole lot of other people out here besides Christians. I love Christians, but there's a lot of other folks out here that I want to have dialogue with. And so I was then the songwriting thing took off and started quadrupling on me, and I had to choose. And so I let that one go, but it's still posted. You can find that anywhere you stream podcasts. It's still up. I have a personal site at johnchisum.com.
Okay.
So I've got two sites. johnchisum.com is a little convoluted and confused because I didn't know who I wanted to be when I grew up. So, but
join the club.
but Nashville Christian Songwriters has really been an exponential growth mode, and I just couldn't keep up with all that. And I'm actually writing and recording and releasing more music than I have in, 2 decades or more. I just released a 30th anniversary single of a song called Firm Foundation that came out in 94 that established me as a global worship leader. I'm really happy with that. I'm getting a lot of good publicity from that. And I'm just having a lot of fun. I'm experimenting musically like never before. I have a song, I'm not sure when this is going to air, but in May we're in 2025 right now.
Yes.
I'm releasing the most, for me, experimental song ever called White Flag. And it's if John Chisum could be Adam Levine. I kind of went to this kind of real pop. Yeah. So check that out. It's not real indicative of all my work, but I'm just having a lot of fun. And I think I might have been telling you before we started recording today that I'm in the convergence of 50 years of life and learning, and everything I've learned about leadership I'm calling on now. Having to be a marketing guy, having to be a CEO, having to deal with lawyers and accountants, and then on the artistic side, these crazy half crazy artists and songwriters, people that are trying to figure their lives out, and I'm still trying to figure mine out. But it's a wonderful life. I wouldn't trade it. I'm so happy and fulfilled, and it's been such a joy to be with you and to know a little bit about your life and your story and your work. I really appreciate the opportunity to hang out with you today.
This has been so great, John. And I will have links. Team PYP, the links to connect with John will be on his show notes page at pyppodcast.com. And the timing of airing this episode with this White Flag song is serendipitous. So look for a link to that. I can't wait to listen to it. Team, if you have not ever heard of John Chisum or listened to any of his music, I encourage you to get in his world. Even if you're not interested in becoming a singer-songwriter, his music is still incredible. It, it always touches me in a very deep way. And so I always like to give my guests the last word. What's one thing you didn't get to say today, John, that you could end us with today?
Wow, that's great. I think what I would say, especially to people who are not maybe into the faith thing, that if you go listen to some of my music, yes, it's very gospel-centric. That's my family. That's where I come from. But God and the universe and being itself loves you, and whatever name or face you ascribe, even if you don't, even if you're not at the point, if you're like Mary Lou's dad, that, there's nothing out there. Well, maybe it or he or she is not out there, but maybe he or she or it is within. And if you look within, I think you're going to really find that there is a silent observer, there's a witness, there's something there that loves you and wants the best for you. And even in what seems like a violent and chaotic universe, there is love and benevolence to be found.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill and more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.